Good morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Pointe Blank, 1 minute at a time. I'm your co-host, Dev Sodiga.
And I'm your other co-host, Hugh David, and on today's show, we are looking at minute 87, which opens with a direct contrast between the neon-lit school reunion ball dance hall downstairs with a corpse cleanup going on upstairs.
And joining us once again, we have two guests this week, Graham Smith and Richard Cottrell. Welcome back, guys.
Hi. Hello again.
So this week, the shows are a little bit different as we borrow an idea from other Movie by Minute podcasts, throwing new viewers of the film straight in at the deep end. No context, no previous minutes, just these minutes. And you will be, if you can't already hear it, and if you're not watching the YouTube version, Dev is grinning like a loon. The sadist has been enjoying this process. I'm very intrigued at the notion. Richard and Graham, have you all ever seen are you all people who've watched John Cusack film before? Is this like a completely new experience to you in terms of everybody in it? Do you guys have any context for this film, given you've seen only 2 minutes of it at this point?
Not hugely. I think I've seen a couple of his films previously. The one about the record shop is the only one I can remember. High Fidelity.
Mm-hmm. High Fidelity, the only one I can... And Con Air, you guys might have seen as well.
So the one I remember seeing is Serendipity, and I remember that as a date when I was like 12 or 13 or whenever it hit cinemas, like going there with my girlfriend at the time and, being a teenage boy in a rom-com being like, what the fuck is this the entire time through?
Yeah. Well, you know what? That's more than enough context for this. You're looking at a guy. First of all, High Fidelity is the film he will make after this, and so because at this point he is starting to produce his own films that he stars in, and so he's getting to have a bit more control and say over his public image, and so this is the first one of that. So we mentioned last episode with you guys, we talked about music. You can start to see the seeds of High Fidelity in that. And in terms of the rom-com element, again, perfect, because at this point in his career, he's mostly known for rom-coms. He's turned up as one of many in an ensemble cast in the Odd War movie, because they all did from that 80s era. They all did at least one Vietnam War movie, But in this case, nobody, he'd never done anything quite like this. So yeah, I think it's kind of interesting that you guys have almost the original context of people who saw this film in 1997,
So he, as a child, he kind of really came to prominence through the John Hughes wave of movies, right? So he very much had that child actor romance comedy kind of thing going on for the longest time. So yes, you guys are seeing it with very similar eyes to folks would have been seeing it as they watched this in the cinema for the first time.
I mean, they would have had like 84 minutes of context before the minutes that we've jumped into, so...
That is
unless they were channel hopping and it was on TV.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of looking at it. Channel hopping and you'll arrive on TV, yeah, fair enough. But
actually, asking that, if you had channel hopped onto this at the point where you did and you'd made it a minute through, would you still be watching now?
I would probably not, because by this point I would have checked to see that we were most of the way through the runtime, and I don't like coming into a film late, despite turning up to yours once, coming into Dread at the last half an hour, at which point we watched the last half an hour of Dread, and then we watched the entire of Dread again. So...
I feel Dread probably is one of those films that works well enough without the context of the first half anyway.
Yeah,
I have the context of knowing Judge Dredd, the character, and so on. So,
that makes sense.
Yeah, but like this isn't the first time Dev's thrown me into the deep end of a film.
God, what is it with Dev? You guys have a very interesting relationship.
I'm quite glad that I've been just far enough away from London to avoid all of this.
I mean, if we want to talk about me arriving at Dev's, because like we used to play board games around at his, so I'd drive around and other people would make their own way there. I think my favourite story of arriving at Dev's was the time that he opened the door and I went, "That pan's about to," at which point the pan behind him on the stove caught fire.
Dev is just looking sheepish here.
Oh, Dev.
I used to head round early in the morning and he'd do us a cooked breakfast, and I'm guessing it was for the eggs. But when, suddenly he's walking out into the back garden. By the way, his garden backed onto the fire station, so he's kind of walking into the back garden holding a flaming pan.
Oh my god, dude.
It is not the only time I've set something in the kitchen on
What?
fire.
Oh god, I'm never letting you near my kitchen ever. Also, what am I doing taking advice from you on cast iron pans then? Forget it. That's it.
I'll be impressed if he set cast iron on fire.
I'm sure he's tried.
I'm pretty sure that the fried eggs pan was a cast iron pan.
There you go.
Yeah.
See?
But the pan survived,
honestly.
hopefully.
The
Yeah,
pan absolutely survived. I think the only way it wouldn't have is if I dumped a load of water on it, but I just sat it outside to burn out, so it was all good.
Yeah.
Wow.
We did not eat those eggs, though.
Useful clarification.
Whatever. Yeah, one tends not to live off ash for breakfast.
I mean, the sausages and bacon, which had been done in the oven, were fine. Although that was the oven that you had to turn the gas on and then reach in with a match to set it alight.
Oh god, one of those. I remember those from the 70s. God. Oh dear. Oh, Dev.
I think it's actually just that the igniter had broken and I'd not bothered to fix it, so I just kept leaving it.
You do know that it's also possible to cook the eggs in the oven as well. You could have saved yourself the trouble.
Well, I'd actually done everything on the stovetop. It was just I'd put everything else into the oven to keep warm, and then the eggs were the last thing. And I'd gotten bored by that point, and there was this distraction of somebody ringing the doorbell. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it.
As I opened the door, there was just smoke coming out the top of this, and I'm like, that is... yeah.
So we were watching a movie, and it was Grosse Pointe Blank. Well, part of a movie.
Yeah, minute 87.
Yeah, you guys were watching a movie.
Yeah, we were watching a movie. You guys were just watching a minute of it.
I mean, the two of us have been watching this movie over and over again for months now at this point.
Yes,
so.
and we're still not bored of it. Bored of it. Definitely not bored of it. I think this is now going to probably beat my previous record for film I've watched the most times consecutively and not got bored of, which was the Hong Kong Infernal Affairs trilogy, because I worked on the UK Blu-ray release of that, so I had to proof all the subtitle streams and the audio streams as well as the video for all three films. So I watched the whole trilogy. I think the first one I went through 8 times in 2 days, and I think then the rest of them I was 3 or 4 times. And I still love that trilogy. So yeah, I feel like Grosse Pointe is holding up at this stage, at least. It's remarkable what we've been able to get out of it. So what did you guys get out of this minute? So we get a brief glimpse of where we left off yesterday's episode with momentarily being seeing from a ceiling shot the dance that's happening at the school reunion, and then we are back to the two buddies trying to clean up a mess created by Cusack's character.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite interesting how quickly he goes straight into this. From the context that we picked up last episode, it's clear that he does, for a living, murder people. But there isn't any real hesitation after that. We talked last episode about he killed them and then he sat there for a second, and then she came in. He had that moment of reflection. This is him over that, and he's now got, okay, what do I need to do? I need to plan. And you can kind of see the cogs whirring as this is business as usual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, he just sort of seems to go, right, this is what we're now doing. We're wrapping the body up. Need more. Go and grab that thing from up there. And whereas the other guy sort of is helping, but is obviously not knowing so much what's going on there. I mean, there's the carrying on with the guy saying, "Is he dead? He's dead. How did he die?" Which is then answered in a way that is just context rather than how he actually died.
Which I think was interesting, given what we were saying last time with the whole "this isn't me" moment. Like, how did he die? The answer isn't "I killed him." The answer is he was a hit. He was a hitman.
There's a hit out on me. Not I stabbed him in the neck with a pen.
Yes. But also, like, the interesting thing with the banner that gets fetched from the ceiling is that's used to clean up the blood where the body was. So going back to my comment earlier about the smear of blood on the wall, they do seem to be doing a fairly thorough job, although a very quick job, in cleaning up this scene as much as they can.
It does definitely feel like it's, at least from Martin. Martin is the character played by John Cusack. Martin's perspective. This is a balancing act between time and effectiveness, right? We've got to get it done quick, but we've got to clean stuff up. So a little smear on the wall we can ignore, but we need to mop up the majority of the blood on the floor so that nobody knows exactly how much blood was spilt. If there's a bloody stain on the floor, people get in fights at reunions or whatever, right? Like that can live with that, but we need to kind of keep things moving to get things done.
So you can sort of see that there's not all of it is cleared up once he's shoving the banner, after mopping it up, he shoves the banner in with the other one. But you can still see in the background a little bit of blood there.
Yeah, no, I think you guys are right. It's very much enough. As much as we can do, we can, excuses can be made. Explanations can be conceived of for the others.
And this is sorry to Richard and Graham who aren't going to understand this, but for Hugh, I mean, this is kind of a reinforcement of that scene we saw in the diner, where one of Cusack's strengths in this, one of Martin's strengths rather, is being able to find things in the environment and use them very, very quickly and very, very effectively. That ability to ad-lib in these high-pressure situations is, possibly his greatest skill in dealing with everything that he deals with.
Yeah, and of course, this is in direct ironic contrast to the fact that everything that he plans, as we said in some previous episodes, tends to go very, very wrong.
Yes.
When he's not planning, he's on top of it. But when he is busy planning, then it doesn't work because you can't. There's certain things about real life. For somebody who's been in the military, he doesn't seem to understand a fundamental piece of military advice that I have heard many times, both as a teacher of history researching military stuff, and now that I work in a school full of ex-military people, which is a plan is something that does not survive contact with the enemy. Like you'd think Martin would have figured this out by now, but here we are, in a high school, wrapping up a dead body in a banner. He has not learned. But as you say, he is good on his feet. He is able to respond to situations. And that fits this kind of film and this era as well. It allows you to have a little bit of irony with what's actually written on the relevant banners. There's a humor is also in the setting and the props. The fact that those banners say what they say, but now we're wrapping a dead body in them. Is very much kind of thematic to the film.
And also telling for, once again, the time and place that this is set in. So this is, the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan in the 90s, which was not a great time for Detroit, which heavily relied on the auto industry. And you're seeing the future is unwritten, believe and achieve. And it's like, these things are categorically not true for 99% of the attendees of this school, right? Like, I mean, it's a fairly wealthy suburb, so maybe some of them do have prospects, but it's going to be a tough future for you kids.
Well, again, just sorry to leave the guests out of it just for one moment more. This goes back to what you and I have said before about the social setup, because the characters we've seen in the film, if they're successful, it's usually at the cost of local business. We're successful because we're selling off the houses to people coming out to the suburb to move. We're successful because we're selling cars that are no longer made in Detroit.
Yeah, got to embrace that white flight.
Yeah, the sort of globalist trade system.
Yeah. So back to much more accessible things. Once again, everybody's favorite conversation topic: the Foley artists. There are some choice sound effects in this moment, particularly with regards to poor deceased Benny Urquidez's body going first of all up against a locker and then over a balcony in the basement. And both times the sound effects on it are just on point. I love it.
There's definitely a crunch, isn't there?
Yeah. When he goes up against the lockers, yeah. I did initially thought when they were doing that whether they were going to stuff the body in the locker in that kind of American high school bully manner and just be like,
cool.
This will be somebody's problem in a few days' time when they can
Some
smell
poor
it.
kid turns up to school and just absolutely traumatized.
God, that would have been so funny if they'd done that, and like in the end credits, there's like a pause, and you cut to the day.
It's just a kid opening a locker and a body crashing out on them.
They missed an opportunity there.
And you know what? It's high school reunion, right? So it's happening in the summer. So it probably would have been 2 months before a kid opens that locker.
Even better.
Depending on the age
Even
rating as to
better.
the quality of the corpse at the end of that.
Oh,
I mean, you'd
man.
hope a janitor or something would smell that, like a member of staff walking those corridors in the off season. I would say an IT person, but this is kind of before that was.
Yes, it is. It's just on the verge of it. We've actually had some. Funnily enough, we've actually had some conversations about the tech in this because, being 97, we in the early parts of the film, there are some interesting, notable moments of tech usage where Dev and I were like, "Oh, okay, they're trying to show that he's actually hip and happening and on the cutting edge, you know." But you guys do, when you watch the film as a whole, have a good laugh at what we thought was cutting edge in '97. But yeah, no, you're right. That would have made a great moment in the credits. What a sting!
I do want to credit Martin with being able to wrap a corpse very, very effectively. Like this corpse, like the wrapping holds together well. Being carried downstairs, being thrown over a balcony, it's still like very well held together.
They managed to carry that quite well and effectively. It's one of the things I sort of after the initial throwing up against the locker where there's clearly heft and weight there, it's sort of trying to believe the weight in it after that point. I mean, I know they support it on the banister, but still.
I was going to say, I quite like the fact that they run it down the banister of the stairs, you know.
With those bumps as well, you kind of feel the body going over each and every one of those bumps that's clearly designed to stop kids sliding down the banister.
I mean, this is 2 years before Weekend at Bernie's, right? So, you know, people, this is relatively fresh humor for the Americans in terms of black humor. Because much as I love those first three Tarantinos, I'm not sure other than Marvin in Pulp Fiction, there's not really any kind of body. It's not about the movement of bodies, is it? It's always about the discussion and the conversation around body parts, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Whereas this is genuinely like old school. It's not quite Ealing comedy, but it's definitely kind of leaning in a
it's pretty close,
direction.
It's pretty close to the Lavender Hill Mob and the like,
the whole moving the body. But as you say, he's also very good at it. And yet again in the film, we see little moments of his expertise in things that you really shouldn't be an expert in.
Yeah, and this is a recurring thing that we've pointed out in the show is Martin is clearly very competent, and the filmmaking emphasizes, you know, the tricks and the techniques that he's using to be good at his job, and I think this is one of them. It is an interesting contrast to Pulp Fiction and clearing up Marvin's corpse in
oh, absolutely,
which is the opposite of this, right? It's not time constrained. Well, it is time constrained, but not
before the wife gets home.
Right, not especially so, and somewhat more, you know.
Isn't
rigorous.
That a Debbie as well, by the way?
I
can't remember. Isn't Tarantino's character's wife? Because I vaguely recall him saying we have a something problem. When Samuel Jackson's character refers to it as the something problem using her name, and for some reason it sounds like it's Debbie. I've probably just been saying Debi Radio far too many times now. But yeah, you're right. It's a very, very different take on the how to dispose of a corpse as comedy notion. I also like the fact that they've got to worry about whether or not they're going to run into anybody because everyone's in that ballroom. But what if somebody's wandering around, like, trying to smoke a fat doobie or something?
Unfortunately, it's not Debbie. It's the Bonnie situation.
That's it, Bonnie. Close enough. Close enough. This Bonnie situation. Oh, it's terrible, isn't it? I'm not even that's not even my favorite Tarantino, and I can still quote whole chunks of it. Oh God, what has that man done to us all?
I'm just watching them go down the stairs, and the way that they're kind of like almost comically shuffling.
That
along.
expression at the bottom of the stairs is sort of the sort of face I associate with John Cusack as well. There.
Yes, it is. It's very much his comic mode, isn't it?
Yeah,
like, this is Cusack in full-on comedy mode.
Yeah.
And then we open the door to what is not just a basement, but is very unlike schools in England, because for the schools that have basements, first of all, which is not that many of them, surprisingly, in Britain, it's also the weirdness of having so Japan and America have furnaces. They use incinerators. The idea being that, you can not only clear rubbish on site without having to call someone in to get rid of it, but in addition to that, you can power a generator if there's an emergency situation. And to be fair, that's actually a really good idea we should be doing in Britain, but there you go. Anyway, but yes, it does allow for a lovely, creepy environment that we're all familiar with from American horror films. The dark, dank basement with barely lit, full of weird objects. Which presumably, looking at the picture myself here, I'm thinking there's at least 3 other things they could use to kill someone within there. And of course, there's a furnace to get rid of a billion. But that'll take us into the next minute.
I was going to say this minute ends with like the body just about to go over the banister. So
yeah. And one of them almost goes over with it. I kept thinking, how does that work? Like, I would have thought that the body's heavy enough that you wouldn't go over with it. But anyway, that's the fun of it.
I just, you know what? It's not just John Cusack's face as they're going down the stairs. Jeremy Piven's facial expression on that as well is also
priceless.
Just priceless. It's fantastic. Should we talk about the high school ballroom a little bit, because we do get little inserts of that both in the last minute and at the start of this minute.
Please do.
And it's I mean, we've had sequences which have focused much more heavily on it, but the choice to keep inserting these to remind the viewer that, like, whilst all this is going on, there's actually a high school reunion just downstairs that everybody from his high school class has shown up to, and they have no idea that any of this is happening, just to kind of set it in context and help underscore that urgency to clean up and dispose of everything. It's a nice little touch, and I think it's scene setting that we don't actually see a lot in the film, or context setting we don't see a lot of in the film, but I think it's important here, and it is done.
Yes. And it's also a nice surreal tone to the whole thing.
Yeah. And once again justifies the music that's playing as well, I guess.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, it puts the music into the whole scene, which, as opposed to a lot of films where the music's just that layer on top and you can kind of mentally subtract it from the scene. Here, no, that music that you're hearing is being played throughout the hallways. So. And
then at the end of this minute, when they're going into the basement, the furnace room, it's much more faded for that section.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just sort of again,
and that's something that happens at a few other points in the film as well. But one thing I do notice is that whilst it's blaring out the speakers throughout the school, we're not getting the loss of fidelity we'd get if it was actually like, it's not got that resonance of awful high school, speakers, which isn't shied away from in like 10 Things I Hate About You in that sequence, right?
But I think that's the irony of diegetic music generally. Like, that is the irony, is that like half the time it's 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 too well mixed. That's just because of the nature of wanting to get it out. Because of the other thing you got to remember, this is the point in time cinema wise where we were starting to really upgrade cinema speakers and increase the range of, because you had more and more sound mix available on the film and the side of the film. This is because I can remember going to see Saving Private Ryan in a small cinema in Red Hill, and I remember being absolutely blown away by the way the surround sound speakers were being used to create 3-dimensional impressions of movement. Bullets literally flew over our head in audible terms. So this is kind of an interesting point in time. Sound and the use of music that in diegetic music. This goes back quite a while, but the way it's mixed and the way it gets heard is, and of course it's the opposite on VHS. On VHS, the whole thing is just mixed back down to a single speaker on a CRT TV, so you don't get any of that. It all gets lost, and which is one of the reasons so many of us wanted to go to the cinema instead, even though we loved watching things at home. So I think, there's a really good point to be made there about the genuine crappiness of high school audio systems. Well, that was then. I mean, now they're really good, but that's another matter entirely.
All right. Anything else for this minute?
Don't think so.
No, because this is a fairly one-note minute. It is mostly how to dispose
Rat
of a body.
Body downstairs.
Although one thing that we kind of skimmed over earlier very quickly was the gun. Like, we saw a pistol on the floor during some of the opening shots this minute, and that has vanished. And I think the assumption is it's gone in with the bloody kind of banner into the whole roll. Although, like, given we're going into a furnace room, we'll cover that in a minute.
Yeah.
Yes, but interestingly, the pen lid that got flicked off stays on the floor. Nobody bothers picking that up.
It's a school. Pen lids are everywhere.
Right, exactly. It's like he's making choices.
You know how many there are in my current classroom right of this minute?
Yeah, he's making choices.
Probably more than you think they are.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I don't even want to think about what's been sticking around the radiators. I'll smell it when I go in on Tuesday. Oh, anyway, sorry. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's interesting what does and doesn't get cleaned up and what they do and don't emphasize from the camera point of view.
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. This was minute 87 of the Grosse Pointe Blank podcast, Debi Radio 79.5 FM, featuring your co-hosts, co-writers, and co-producers, Deb Soligar and Hugh David.
Today's guests were Richard Cottrell and Graham Smith. You can find us at All Good Podcast Players, also on YouTube, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Spotify at Debi Radio, as well as our website, debiradio.com. And for all of those, it is Debi spelt like in the movie, D-E-B-I Radio.
And if you want to have a chat with us, come and find us on the Facebook listeners group, Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club. Once more, that is DEBI Radio.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't